She stepped down from the wagon with dust clinging to the hem of her dress, and a word stitched tightly to her name. Infertile. It followed her like a shadow she could not outrun. Her family had not sent her west to begin again. They had sent her away to disappear, wrapping exile in the thin paper of a job offer. Ahead of her stretched a Wyoming ranch, and a man who did not yet know he had been handed someone else's shame. If this place rejected her too, there would be nowhere left to go. The Shelton parlor had smelled of lemon oil and disappointment. Miriam Shelton sat straight-backed in a carved chair that had never been comfortable, her hands folded in her lap as though holding herself together. Across from her, her mother poured tea with the cold precision of a woman performing a duty she resented. Her father stood near the window, watching the street as if something more interesting than his daughter's failure might pass by. The September light cut sharp lines across the floor, making everything feel edged and brittle. Miriam had been home for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since she returned from the McConnell farm with her belongings packed into the same trunk she had taken as a bride 2 years earlier. 3 weeks since it had been made clear, with devastating politeness, that a woman who could not produce children had no place there. Her mother set the teapot down and spoke as if discussing the weather. Her father agreed without turning around. They believed it would be best if Miriam accepted work elsewhere. Employment, they called it. Domestic work, her mother said, smoothing the words like they might soften the blow. A rancher near the Wyoming border needed help, room and board in exchange for cooking and cleaning. Miriam understood immediately. This was not opportunity. This was removal. When she asked if she could refuse, her mother's cup paused midair.
You won't refuse.
It was not a question. That night, Miriam packed the attic room she had been given, too small to feel welcome and too cold to feel cared for. She folded dresses and aprons, packed a recipe book her mother would not miss, and a silver locket with no portrait inside. She packed lightly, not because she owned little, but because hope itself had learned to travel small. Downstairs, her parents spoke in low tones. The sound carried relief. The next morning, a wagon arrived. The driver asked no questions. Her mother reminded her to write. They both knew she would not. Her father handed her an envelope with money for the first month, as though paying for her own disappearance. When the wagon rolled away, Miriam looked back once. Her mother had already gone inside. Her father checked his pocket watch. The road stretched west, farmland thinning into open prairie. The sky widened until it felt like the only thing holding the world together. Miriam watched fences vanish and thought of the McConnell farm, of her husband's pity turning to resentment, of smaller portions at dinner and belongings moved quietly to the barn loft. She swallowed hard and fixed her eyes on the horizon. Crying would change nothing. By late afternoon, they reached a narrow road cutting through grassland that seemed to mock the idea of ownership. The ranch appeared slowly, a plain house and a larger barn, built for work rather than comfort. When the wagon stopped, Miriam's heart hammered against her ribs. If this place rejected her too, there would be nowhere left to go. The door opened and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sun-worn face that gave nothing away. He looked at her as one might look at a fence post. He asked her name. She gave it. No hand was offered, and none was taken. The wagon rolled away, leaving silence in its wake. Inside, the house was spare and clean. A table, chairs, a fireplace, a place that served a purpose and asked nothing more. He told her to sit and placed food before her, plain but well made. He watched her eat without comment, then explained the arrangement. Work, meals, rest, $12 a month. It was more than she expected. When she asked if there was anything else she should know, he said he did not ask questions he did not need answered. It was not kindness, but it was not cruelty either. It was neutrality, and Miriam had not known neutrality in months. Her room was small but clean, with a window facing the corrals. She unpacked slowly, listening to the wind press against the walls. For the first time in years, no one was measuring her. It terrified her. Miriam woke before dawn the next morning and began work without being told. She cooked, cleaned, scrubbed, until the restless energy inside her burned down to something manageable. When she went to the pump near the barn, A large rust-colored cow stepped into her path and knocked her aside with deliberate annoyance. It happened again and again over the next days, until Miriam, exhausted and fed up, curtsied to the animal and spoke to it like royalty. From behind her came a sound that might have been a laugh. The rancher stood watching, something like amusement on his face. From that day forward, the cow let her pass. Other small victories followed. A stubborn gray mare that refused to move for him followed Miriam without hesitation. Meals improved under her care, and the man who had once eaten quickly and left began staying at the table longer. Conversation came in short exchanges at first, then lingered. Weather, work, small repairs. One evening, Miriam asked why he had hired her. He said town women asked too many questions. She pointed out that she had not. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted. Autumn settled over the ranch. Braxton began lingering after supper. Miriam began asking careful questions. Where he had come from, how long he had been there. He answered plainly and asked his own in return. One evening, he asked if she had ever done something just because she wanted to. The question caught her off guard. Ooh, she realized she had not. He told her it might be time to learn a different way, one where she stopped apologizing for taking up space. Weeks passed, and the air between them grew charged with glances and pauses. Miriam found herself smoothing her hair before supper. He watched her move through the house as though solving a puzzle. One afternoon they repaired a fence together, working in silence until he said she complained to the wrong people. The idea that her voice might matter felt fragile and new. By November, frost crept into the mornings. Evenings were spent by the fire, quiet and companionable. One night he told her she did not flinch anymore. The house, the land, the steady work had given her something she had never known: safety without judgment. When he asked if he was reading things wrong, she surprised herself by saying he was not. The kiss that followed was deliberate and unhurried, filled with certainty rather than doubt. When they pulled apart, her heart raced, but she did not step back. For the first time, she did not retreat before rejection could find her. As the fire crackled and the wind moved through the prairie grass outside, Miriam knew something had changed. What had been meant to diminish her had instead given her space to grow, and she sensed that whatever came next would alter her life forever. Winter tightened its grip on the ranch, but inside the house something warm and steady took root. After that first kiss, nothing was said out loud for days, yet everything had changed. Braxton did not rush her. He did not press or demand explanations. He simply stayed. He stayed at the table longer, by the fire later, in the quiet spaces where Miriam had learned to brace herself for disappointment. Instead of disappointment, she found calm. Their closeness grew in small, careful ways. A hand brushing hers when passing a plate. His coat placed over her shoulders without comment when the nights turned sharp. Her laughter coming easier, louder than she remembered it ever being. The ranch itself seemed to settle around them, as if approving the shift. Work continued, steady and honest. Miriam learned the rhythms of the land. She learned when cattle needed water before they bawled for it, when bread dough needed more time because the air was cold, when Braxton needed silence more than words. In return, he learned her habits. He noticed when she grew tired and stepped in without making her feel small. He listened when she spoke, really listened, and that alone felt like a gift she had never been given. One evening, as snow fell soft and thick outside, Braxton asked her to sit with him by the fire. He did not dress the moment up. He did not stumble over speeches. He simply told her the truth. He told her he wanted her there, not as hired help, not as charity, but because his life was better with her in it. Miriam felt fear rise, sharp and familiar, but she did not let it rule her. She told him she wanted the same. From that night on, they were no longer circling each other. They moved forward together, quietly, deliberately. There was no scandal, no drama, just two people choosing each other in a place that asked for work and rewarded honesty. As the weeks passed, Miriam noticed changes in herself. At first, she ignored them. Fatigue was easy to explain. Winter was long and the work was demanding. When nausea followed, she blamed poor sleep or spoiled food. She had learned not to hope for things that had already been taken from her once. But the signs grew harder to dismiss. The smell of coffee turned her stomach. Her dresses felt tighter. One morning she was sick behind the barn before the sun had fully risen. Braxton noticed immediately. He did not scold. He did not dismiss it. He told her they were going to town. The ride was quiet, Miriam holding tightly to him as the horse carried them over frozen ground. The doctor's office was small and smelled of dust and old paper. The examination was brief but thorough. When the doctor spoke, the words landed heavy and unreal. She was with child. Miriam felt the room tilt. She had been told for years that this was impossible. She had built her identity around that impossibility, had been punished for it, cast aside because of it. Her first response was denial. Her second was fear. But when the doctor added that there was a strong chance she was carrying more than one child, fear gave way to shock so deep it stole her breath. Braxton did not speak at first. He stood very still, as though grounding himself. Then he looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen directed at her before. Pride, wonder, joy. On the ride home, Miriam cried, not quietly, not politely, but fully, with sobs that shook her body. Braxton held her as best he could on horseback, murmuring reassurances that felt solid and real. He told her they would handle whatever came. He told her she was not alone. He told her he loved her. He asked her to marry him that very day, not as obligation, not because of the child, but because he had wanted to long before the doctor ever spoke. Miriam said yes, without hesitation. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen. They married quietly in town 2 weeks later. There were no guests, no celebration, only a simple ceremony and a certainty that did not need witnesses. When they returned to the ranch as husband and wife, the land greeted them the same way it always had, with wind and wide sky and the promise of work. Pregnancy changed Miriam in ways she had not expected. Her body grew heavy and strong at the same time. Some days she felt fragile, other days powerful beyond words. Braxton watched her carefully, learning when to step in and when to let her prove to herself that she could still do things on her own. As winter gave way to spring, the doctor confirmed what he had first suspected. There were 2 children, twins, 2 steady heartbeats where Miriam had been told there would never be one. The knowledge frightened her, but it also filled her with a fierce determination. She had been underestimated her entire life. She would not underestimate herself now. The birth came on a clear spring night, long and exhausting and overwhelming. The ranch house, once quiet, filled with urgency and voices and effort. When it was over, Miriam lay spent but alive. 2 small cries cutting through the air like proof of something miraculous. 2 boys. Healthy, real. Braxton wept openly when he held them. He did not try to hide it. He did not apologize for it. He looked at Miriam as though she had rewritten the world. The months that followed were hard, harder than anything Miriam had known. Sleep was scarce. Her body ached. Some days she felt she did nothing but feed and rock and worry. But there was joy threaded through the exhaustion, the weight of a child against her chest, the sound of Braxton singing badly at night to calm them. The quiet moments when the house finally slept, and she realized she was still standing. The ranch changed with them. It grew louder, messier, fuller. Braxton expanded the herd. Miriam planted a garden that thrived under her care. Neighbors came and went, some curious, some kind, some simply surprised. Word traveled faster than Miriam expected. The infertile daughter had returned west with twins. She did not care. By the time summer arrived, Miriam had found herself again. Not the girl who had been sent away in shame, but a woman who had built something lasting. The ranch prospered. The children grew strong. And for the first time, Miriam understood that what had been meant as cruelty had given her freedom. What her family had tried to erase had become the foundation of everything she now held dear. And she knew, deep in her bones, that the life ahead would not be easy, but it would be hers. By the time the twins were old enough to walk without falling every few steps, the ranch no longer felt like the edge of the world. It felt like the center of one. The house that had once echoed with quiet now held constant sound. Small feet on wooden floors, laughter that came suddenly and often. The low hum of life lived fully. Miriam woke each morning before the sun, as she always had, but now there were small voices calling for her before she even reached the stove. Troy rose slowly, thoughtful, even as a toddler, studying everything before deciding what to do with it. Edward moved fast and without hesitation, curious about everything and careful about nothing. Braxton joked that between the two of them they balanced each other out. Miriam thought they balanced him too. Life was not gentle, but it was honest. Some days were hard, very hard. There were sick animals, broken fences, nights when one child cried while the other slept, and then they traded places. There were moments when Miriam felt stretched thin and wondered how she had become responsible for so much. But then there were mornings when the sun spilled gold across the prairie and both boys ran toward her at once, arms open, calling her name. Those moments quieted every doubt. Braxton proved to be a steady father. Not loud, not dramatic, but present. He carried one child on each hip, without complaint. He learned how to change diapers, how to warm milk, how to calm fear in the middle of the night. When Miriam faltered, he stepped in without making her feel weak. When he faltered, she did the same. The ranch prospered, slowly at first, then more surely. Braxton expanded the herd. Miriam's garden grew larger each season. She sold eggs, butter, and preserves in town. People began to know her not as the woman who had been sent away, but as the woman who made the best bread for miles and raised fine boys with calm hands and clear eyes. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after the twins were born, a letter arrived. Miriam recognized the handwriting immediately. Her mother's, precise, controlled. Familiar in a way that tightened her chest. She stood in the kitchen holding the envelope while the boys played on the floor and Braxton worked outside. 4 years had passed without a word. Long enough for silence to feel normal. She opened the letter slowly. Her father was dead. Pneumonia. The funeral had been small. Her sister had seen Miriam in town with a husband and 2 children. If it was true, her mother offered congratulations. If Miriam wished to visit, she would be welcome. Braxton came in to find her staring at the paper. He did not tell her what to do. He only reminded her that she owed her family nothing. Miriam knew that was true, but she also knew she needed something else. Closure, perhaps. Or proof, not for them, but for herself. They traveled east a week later. The town of her childhood looked smaller than she remembered, narrower, dimmer. The buildings felt close together, the sky less wide. People stared. Some whispered. Miriam did not lower her head. She had nothing to hide. When she walked into her mother's parlor, the same room where she had been dismissed years ago, she felt no fear, only distance. Her mother looked older, smaller somehow. Carefully, Miriam told her the truth. She was married. She had twin sons. She was happy. Her mother admitted they had been wrong. Miriam did not forgive them. She did not need to. She only needed to say the words she had carried for years, that she was not broken. That she had built a life with her own hands, that their judgment had not defined her. She left the house lighter than she had entered it. The next day, she brought the boys to meet their grandmother, not as an offering, not as a plea, but as a fact. This was her life now. Take it or leave it. When they left town, Miriam did not look back. Home greeted them with open land and familiar sounds. Zoria watched the boys with patient eyes. The garden waited. The house smelled like wood smoke and bread. That night, as the twins slept, Miriam sat on the porch with Braxton and watched the stars come out one by one. Years passed. The twins grew into boys who ran fast and laughed loud. Troy remained thoughtful, careful with words. Edward climbed everything and feared nothing. They learned the land, the way children learn language, naturally, completely. They helped with chores, made messes, asked endless questions. Miriam changed too. She grew more confident, more certain. The shame that had once followed her like a shadow faded until it was nothing more than a distant memory. She was not the woman her family had sent away. She was stronger than that woman. Wiser. Whole. One evening, as autumn settled in again, Miriam stood in the garden watching the boys chase each other between the rows. Braxton joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. The land stretched wide and quiet before them. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come here?" he asked. She did, sometimes. The thought no longer frightened her. "Yes," she said, "and then I stop." "Why?" "Because it doesn't matter," she replied. "This is where I am. This is who I am." He kissed her temple. "I'm glad they sent you. So am I." The wind moved through the grass, steady and alive. Miriam watched her sons run under the open sky and felt something deep and settled inside her. What had been meant to humiliate her had given her freedom. What had been meant to erase her had allowed her to grow. She had not come back with twins to prove anyone wrong. She had come back whole, and that was enough.